Welcome to today's Ethnic Media Services Zoom news conference. I'm Pilar Marrero, Associate Editor at EMS. After the hottest summer on record, EMS today has invited 3 chief heat officers based in Phoenix, Miami, and Los Angeles, the first in the country, to talk about how their cities were impacted, what measures they believe work best to help residents deal with the heat, and what they think needs to be done, not just in their cities, but nationwide, as extreme heat becomes the new normal. Today's briefing grew out of a series of briefings EMS organized for California ethnic media to track extreme heat that were sponsored by Heat Ready California, the state's initiative to promote greater awareness of this most dangerous extreme weather pattern. Go to heatreadyca.com for more info. Heat, as we know, already kills more Americans than any other weather-related incident, and the climate crisis has made those events increasingly deadly. Miami, a city with a tropical climate that makes its temperature more dangerous, Phoenix, the hottest, largest city in the country, and Los Angeles, a city that experts predict to have 5 times more heat waves by 2050, are the 3 profiled here by their heat-fighting leadership. Our speakers today include Jane Gilbert, Chief Heat Officer, Miami-Dade County Office of Resilience, David Hondula, Director of the Office of Heat Response and Mitigation in Phoenix, and Marta Segura, Chief Heat Officer of the City of Los Angeles. We ask speakers to speak slowly for our interpreters in Spanish, Mandarin, and Korean, and we ask reporters to enter questions in the chat, which we will address following each speaker as time allows. Our speakers are also encouraged to answer questions in the chat throughout the conference. We will send the video of today's briefing and expanded bios with contact information for each speaker to all participants later today. And so, do we have Marta?
Yes.
Okay. Hello, Marta. Marta Segura, Chief Heat Officer of Los Angeles, someone that we have known for a very, very long time. Welcome to today, and thank you for making this happen.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting us all. Pleasure to be here.
So talk to us about how the city of LA lived this summer, and what are the things that your office has been working on in order to help Angelenos deal with it.
Well, in contrast to last summer, this summer was a lot more manageable, I would say, because before the last heat season, which was our hottest heat season on record for Los Angeles, and we had 10 straight days of an extraordinary heat wave. I had just been assigned or designated to be the City of LA's Chief Heat Officer. But since then, thanks to the support of some of my colleagues here, like Jane Gilbert and David Hondula, who really started before me, they showed me how, to run a heat campaign. I loved Arizona's model, and then I learned much more from Jane's, and Jane had the messaging of calling this a heat season. I think that's appropriate because now our summers are from mid-June to mid-November. But to get to what we're doing, I think we have been, and we must continue to modify our city's infrastructure to adapt to extreme heat, to have livable cities and habitable cities and walkable cities. So we're investing in equitable decarbonization of our buildings, of our transportation system, of our energy system. And we're doing it with the collaboration and coordination with community leaders, especially frontline community leaders, through our Climate Equity LA series. That is a signature program for our heat office and our climate office. We ran a really big heat campaign this year, the Heat Relief for LA campaign, in 7 different languages. You saw the bus shelters everywhere throughout the city and 2,300 buses. And we have been having multiple events and coordinating that as well with nonprofit organizations and compensating nonprofit organizations to support not just our social media campaign, but our community health educator campaign. And we've applied for federal and state grants in order to continue to expand on our infrastructure and capacity. So I think, there's a long road ahead of all the mitigations and climate adaptations that we have to do. But one important thing I want to signal to everybody is that we must have integrated planning, because cities often have, climate action plans or local hazard mitigation plans or general plans. Well, now we're developing heat plans, right? Heat action plans, and we're calling ours the Heat Action and Resilience Plan. It'll be done this March. What's important to point out is that extreme heat wasn't seen as the primary climate hazard before I was part of this office, but now extreme heat is a huge part of every single one of those plans as a result of the work of this office and the advocacy of this office, which means we'll maximize our resources and maximize our investments to mitigate heat and climate change in the city of Los Angeles. I could say a lot more, but kind of want to stop there so you can ask other questions to other panelists. Thanks, Pilar.
Thank you, Marta. Obviously, we know, because we've been following this issue, that vulnerable communities are more vulnerable, again, to the effects of heat. How has your office addressed this in particular? How do you help these communities that don't have, for example, enough parks or trees or AC even, to adapt to this new situation?
Right. Well, I mean, I think I first want to start with the fact that it will take a long time to transition these low-income homes to have the necessary thermal cooling and safe cooling for the summer. So what the cities like ours are doing is providing resilience centers and cooling centers. Every public library, every rec center, every senior center, and even our family resource centers. Our public-facing facilities can serve as these cooling and resilience centers, and they do. But we need to continue to adapt them to be part of the social fabric so that people know that they're there as a refuge from the heat and as a refuge from extreme weather, period, right? And it's really important for folks to know that even 3 hours of refuge from a heat wave will help them survive for the next day. So I want to make sure that, and then we found that these low-income communities are the ones that access these cooling centers and resilience centers the most. But in terms of investment, what I'm saying is that we have to invest first and foremost in these historically disinvested communities for tree canopy, for open space, for increased nature-based solutions, but also decarbonizing their homes to make them healthier homes, because the carbon emitted and the methane emitted from gas appliances inside homes also triggers asthma attacks, cardiac attacks, kidney failure, particularly during heat waves, because the heat risk map for UCLA also told us that that's where the majority of excess deaths happen, and excess ER visits happen in Los Angeles. So we really we feel these are preventable deaths and preventable hospitalizations, and we want that number to go to 0. So we've made public health and health metrics and health outcomes a priority metric for Los Angeles. We're not just investing in carbon reduction anymore. We're investing in healthy, thriving communities. And I think it's important that cities align all of their general managers and their city leadership to basically align and sing the same song so we can get to those goals further and faster.
We have a question from Henrietta Burrows. Henrietta, go ahead.
Thank you. The cooling centers sound like a good idea, but I'm just wondering, let's say if there's a heat wave that starts in the morning, these heat waves can last through the night. So when people go to the cooling centers, they might have to stay all day long, depending upon the length of the heat wave. So what accommodations are there for them? Or can they be fed? Or it seems to me these can get very problematic, given the length of the heat wave.
I'll give a short answer, then let my colleagues answer. So basically, there are augmented cooling centers that are open through 9 or 10 p.m. at night and on weekends and holidays. So those are the ones that provide the greatest accommodations when we actually declare that there is a heat alert, right? But we need more of those augmented cooling centers, and we need to make sure that people understand that they're there for that purpose, and they don't have to be there all day. Like I said earlier, I think most people only need refuge from extreme heat 3 or 4 hours of the day so their bodies can cool down. So when there is a heat wave, it really depends on a consultation with your doctor, honestly, to see if you need to be there the whole time or if you just need to be there 3 or 4 hours to recover from the heat wave. I'll pass it over to Jane next.
Yes, please go ahead. Ms.
Do you
Gilbert.
want me to go, or do you want me to wait?
No, I do have any answer
Yeah.
to that question?
I'm pretty much gonna piggyback on what Marta said. We also have our libraries and our park recreational facilities and our community action human services sites serves as cooling sites similar to Marta. Someone can go there any hot day and cool off, but we open certain designated facilities for extended hours during a heat warning. But Marta's right, this is just typically what health practitioners tell us, is that your body does need like a few hours to cool down, but it can recuperate. In Miami, we do have very high AC penetration, so if needed, people usually can find a place to cool off at night. But what we're trying to avoid is them having to spend a huge amount of money cooling their homes during the day or other accommodations. So we haven't actually seen a whole lot of use of even our cooling centers during the day. So there hasn't been the demonstrated need for cooling centers at night.
Yeah, it might be what you mentioned, that Miami is used to having AC as opposed to LA, where not everyone has AC. I don't know if that's the situation in Miami. Before we move to the presentation by Ms. Gilbert and Mr. Hondula, Marta, so to summarize, what are the biggest risks or concerns for a city like Los Angeles as it addresses extreme heat conditions? What is your list of extreme concerns?
Wow, there's so many. I think one of my biggest concern that looms around in my head is how we get from policy to implementation in a coordinated fashion, so that we can have accountability and ensure that these investments that we are fundraising for and planning for actually take place in an accelerated pace, so that we can have the climate solutions and the health outcomes that we need. I also think it's important to align extreme heat with climate goals, with equity goals, with health goals, as we're creating that level of accountability. And at the City of LA, we do have an equity index that helps general managers align their investments with that equity index to ensure that our funding is going to these vulnerable communities in areas of historical disinvestment. Of course, one of my greatest concerns is the unacceptable rate of deaths and hospitalizations in low-income neighborhoods where we don't have AC, that are pollution burdened, that have high levels of chronic illness, and having enough public awareness campaigns. And speaking of public awareness, I want to thank Heat Ready California, and I want to thank CalOES and Listos for participating in our heat relief campaign this summer and helping us disseminate really critically needed information in hard to reach communities. And I think that's the other thing that burdens me. How do we reach these difficult to reach communities in multiple languages fast enough so that they can build up their capacity for disaster resilience overall, and specifically for extreme heat resilience, so that they know that they can prevent deaths in their families, in their communities, and that there's something that can be done. Because I think that everybody knows it gets hot, but not everybody knows that we have extreme weather now, that it's much more risky and much more dangerous. So we have to change that mindset and change it quickly with the support of all of these vulnerable communities and their leaders.
Thank you so much. And please, Marta, stay around because we're going to have more of a conversation. I'm going to move on to Jane Gilbert. She's the Chief Heat Officer of Miami-Dade County Office of Resilience. She was the first Chief Heat Officer in the country. Ms. Gilbert, welcome. And tell us how you faced that first. How did you became the first? How did you design your work in order to kind of lead in this situation with this new position that is being created by the climate situation?
Yeah, well, thank you. And it's a pleasure to be speaking with this group of journalists, reporters today. So I think I want to start with really how my position came about to begin with, because I think it's very informative. You know, Miami is known internationally for risks to sea level rise and hurricanes. And I actually served as the city of Miami's first chief resilience officer, developing a unified resilience strategy with our county where I work now. And when I was in the city and started to go and do outreach for our climate resilience strategy, I began to realize that heat was a concern, particularly in our most vulnerable communities. And then in 2020, a group of community-based organizations, a coalition, went and did a series of surveys and focus groups in our most vulnerable communities throughout the county to ask what people's top concerns were related to climate change. And it wasn't sea level rise, and it wasn't even hurricane risk. It was extreme heat, because that's what they were living day in and day out, whether it was at their job, in their homes, the burden of the utility bills, or AC breaking down in July and not being able to replace it and fix it, waiting at a bus stop too long and ending up in an emergency room, not being able to take their kids to the playground anymore during the summer, kids getting ill at summer camps. All of this is what they were living in experiencing. And so our mayor heard this. We had also been a partner with the Adrienne Arsht Rockefeller Foundation Resilience Center. And that was where the idea of this position came about, was that we need to work, as Marta so well articulated, across departments and even across community stakeholders to come up with this unified response, because it's not just one department that can solve this problem. You know, there's an emergency response role, there's a communications role, there's urban planning and tree planting, there's housing issues, there's a lot of different components. And you know, one of the things that you asked about lessons learned and what we're doing, one of the things that I really learned both when I was developing our resilience strategy and really put into place with our extreme heat action plan is, you know, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far and have great impact, you need to go together. You need to go with lots of people. And so in our planning, we engaged our state health department, our National Weather Service, our community-based organizations, our university partners, our different municipalities. So the county has 34 municipalities inside the county, and then we serve as the city for 1.1 million people. And so all of them were involved in the planning, and we had people with lived experience. And so our actions also have multiple partners, whether it's partnering with Baptist Health and Florida Clinicians for Climate Action in trainings and outreach to healthcare practitioners and community health centers, or it's with community-based organizations and our emergency management on developing heat health training for our disaster volunteers, or it's with our community action and human services and accelerating the weatherization program. So all of it is through these. And I should say, I sit within the county's Office of Resilience. So as Marta said, that it's really important that we think about energy efficiency and carbon mitigation alongside of heat management and mitigation, that I work closely with our energy and carbon mitigation team in the Office of Resilience for all the affordable housing retrofits we put in 1,700 efficient AC units in our public housing, thank God, before this summer, because unlike LA, this summer was really challenging here in Miami. We have an average of about 6 or 7 days out of a year that hit a heat index at 105 or above, and that's even in the last 15 years. So even with climate change and urban development patterns, that's been our average. This summer it was, and I know David can knock my stats out of the park, but that's why he gets to go last. But with a heat index over 105, we had over 50 days with a heat index over 105. And we are projected to have the highest increase of any county in the United States with days with a heat index over 100 by mid-century, the highest increased. So our actions are split up in 3 goal areas. And one really first goal is to inform, prepare, and protect people, help people manage the extreme heat that's here and that's going to continue through a heat season we named because we have chronic high heat from May through October in Miami. And so we want to make sure we're not waiting for a heat advisory or warning to tell people that they need to be careful. And so we do social media, traditional media, bus shelter ads, and radio and YouTube, but also in our largest languages other than English or Spanish and Haitian Creole. So everything we put out is in those 3 languages. And we partner with our community-based organizations and those community disaster volunteers to help us get the word out in our most vulnerable communities. And just to share how big a difference it is, in our heat vulnerability analysis, we looked at what the heat-related emergency department visits and hospitalizations were by zip code in the county. And we have some zip codes that have 4 and 5 times the number of heat-related emergency department visits and hospitalizations than other zip codes. And the strongest correlating factors are high poverty rates, high land surface temperatures, in other words, our urban heat islands, because our cities are getting hotter. Yes, because of climate change, but also how we develop as cities with more asphalt, less trees, less vegetation. And that's something we can do to address and bring down that heat in those microclimates. But land surface temperatures, high percentage of outdoor workers, and high number of households with children. And so we have designed our interventions to address both the geographies that were most vulnerable and the demographics that are most vulnerable in our county. So the first goal is all that we do trainings in addition to healthcare practitioners and disaster volunteers. We did trainings for employers on outdoor worker safety protocols, with summer camp providers, with all our cooling site staff at our libraries and parks. We worked with the National Weather Service on piloting an update to our advisory and warning thresholds because they were too high. Of course, then we didn't want it to be too often. And then we had this summer and we ended up we would have had a lot of advisories even with our old thresholds, but we had an especially high number of them. But anyway, and we worked with our emergency management on updating our protocols. And then our goal too is all around that, helping people cool their homes affordably. And so I mentioned a couple of things that we've already done. We increased our weatherization program. We just are now launching an AmeriCorps Energy Corps program where young people are getting trained to go into houses, with rental housing, the landlord often doesn't have an incentive to retrofit their property, and the tenant doesn't either have the resources or the desire to invest a lot. but there are a lot of low cost and behavioral solutions that can help people save. So our Energy Corps going in and analyzing what they may need and actually helping them to weather strip and insulate pipes and put in a programmable thermostat and shower heads and light bulbs, and also teach homeowners and tenants about what they can do to save on energy and water costs. The last goal is really cooling our neighborhoods, and that's a big investment in our urban forestry. We want to get to a 30% tree canopy overall. We currently have 20%, and so I've been working across departments for the plan for how we're going to do that, both with policies and collaborative partnerships. We've set up a partnership with our school district. We're piloting some programs with faith-based community that own a lot of land in the areas that we need it most. And we just won, and I know both LA and Phoenix won big grants from the USDA Forest Service to focus on street trees in our most vulnerable areas. We got a $10 million grant towards that. So we're very excited to get that going. I could go on, but I don't want to hog. I want to get questions.
Yeah, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the format a little bit. Instead of going to questions for you, I'm just going to go to our third speaker, and then we can just have questions and all of you can chime in. I think that would be best. Thank you so much, Ms. Gilbert, and we're looking forward to hearing more from you in the question and answer session. And I'm going to go now to David Hondula. He's Director of the Office of Heat Response and Mitigation in Phoenix. Mr. Hondula, welcome. Hello, hello. I think you're muted. Yes, there you are.
Yeah, the permission's taken care of. Yeah, thank you, and thanks everyone for being here, and always great to share the time with Jane and Marta.
Yeah, talk to us about, because you are in this position, but you're also a researcher. So talk to us about how you came to this work, and what are you being able to implement now that you are in this position for the city of Phoenix?
Well, thanks so much to be here, and I'll try not to duplicate with the great words we've already heard from Jane and Marta. The timing of how our position came about is not too dissimilar from Jane's, but kind of a different road to get there. And my individual road, certainly a bit different, coming in from the academic side. A little bit of a case of be careful what you wish for, with wonderful colleagues like Sarah Miro and Lad Keith, who I'm sure some of you are following their research. We were starting to write about what Jane and Marta were probably seeing every day, that there is this apparent governance gap for heat at all scales of government, local, county, state, federal, and somehow or another that idea crept into the minds of our mayor and city council, or maybe they came to it on their own, hard to know exactly. So about two years ago, they decided to create an office as part of our city manager's office in the city of Phoenix. And almost 2 years ago to the day, I had the great honor of being asked to lead that office. And we've been learning how to do that work ever since, stride and stride with Jane and Marta. It's quite interesting for our team is that we're now a team of 6 with some folks who focus on the short-term strategies that we heard about, others more focused on long-term. But almost all of our team is comprised of newcomers to local government, some from the private sector, others from academia. And Jane, I just loved your remarks about fast alone and far together. Without understanding how to turn the mechanisms of local government to work toward our heat goals, we go about nowhere on our own, because we need to understand the procurement and the legal details. And I think it's actually been a very happy marriage of sorts with, our team members are we don't know what the typical questions are that people say no to. So we don't know not to ask those questions. And then we're finding ways to get to different yeses that in some cases are working to benefit the community on heat programs, but maybe even more generally. And just as one example, as we've been thinking about getting money out into the community for tree planting, we've learned that not every step of that process, when a local organization wants to do business with city government, not every step of that process has been available bilingually. In Phoenix, that's of course a huge barrier. So as we're trying to create documents that will work for more groups to engage with us on tree planting efforts in English or Spanish, we're also hopeful that that will spill over into the rest of local government and our work in Phoenix. I'll note you're going back to one of the questions from the beginning. How was it in Phoenix this summer? Certainly a challenge. We did set new record for number of 110-degree days. And that was after a relatively mild start to our summer, kind of a cool June by our standards. And then almost every day in July hit 110 degrees in order. Firefighters responded to about twice as many heat-related 911 calls that month compared to years past. We're tracking about 25% above where we were last year in terms of heat-associated deaths that have been confirmed. And as Jane and Marta mentioned, we have pretty good information about how those impacts are distributed in the community. Here in Phoenix, the heat challenge and the homelessness challenge are really one and the same. About half of our heat-associated deaths, 40%, 50% some years, occur among people experiencing homelessness. Also, about half have some indication of substance use, particularly methamphetamines show up a lot in the reports. We've really, as such, been focusing our short-term efforts on engaging with people who are experiencing homelessness or people who perhaps are at risk of encountering homelessness. So that's directed a lot of efforts to being out on the streets, spreading the word through word of mouth, trying to be those mouths, but also everything we were talking about earlier. What does it really mean to have accessible cooling centers for such a wide range of circumstances that people are in? And how do we have the right staff volunteer models at these places so it can be a humane and safe experience? And I know we're not all the way there yet. You know, I don't know if Jane and Marta would say that they feel like they've cracked that nut either, but I think we have a lot of work to do there. And I think that's going to take some new resources from different scales of government. Our cooling center network locally has largely been volunteer-based, facilities voluntarily opting in to participate, individual volunteers willing to sit and hand out water bottles. I think we need a transition toward at least some professionalization of pieces of that work, because the challenges that we see at these places are so critical. The volunteer effort is tremendous, but I think we really do need professional capacity there. Happy to talk about tree planting. There might be some questions about cool pavement, which Phoenix is in the news a lot about for various reasons, but looking forward to the questions and dialogue, and so happy just to be joined with Marta and Jane. We're seeing evolution at all scales of government in this conversation. There is in the Biden White House, there's kind of the equivalent of the three of us now working on developing national strategy for heat. So I'm hopeful that we're at a really important inflection point in this conversation. Thanks again for the opportunity to be here.
Thank you. Wow, the work that you three are doing is so important. I wonder how effective has the effort been, and this goes to all of you, to build public awareness about the extreme heat. Does the public really understand how the climate has changed? And as someone else in the chat pointed out, now everything has become so political. This is not just a threat, it's also a politically charged issue. So how is that affecting your work? And I can start with anyone that wants to start, but I would like to hear from the three of you.
Well, maybe we'll snake it, and I'll continue and then hand it
Yeah.
back off. You know,
Cool.
I'll first note that our office does not hold any of the environmental regulatory roles for the city. That's held in a different office. So some questions about greenhouse gas monitoring, air quality compliance, that all falls elsewhere, and we are not subject to some of the challenges directly that come with that. And I'll say I don't have a strong sense that the broader climate politics have really interfered with our mission. I don't think there's strong public objection here to the idea that people are suffering in the heat. Many people are suffering, and we need to do better, whether that's suffering in terms of a daily inconvenience or suffering in terms of actual risk of fatality occurring in the heat. And I mean, it's not hard to look at the map here in the city of Phoenix and find places where more cooling resources could be helpful, whether they be trees, whether they be engineered shade structures. So we've been lucky to work around, maybe adjacent to the climate politics. But I'll even note, harkening back to my previous role, we've been in living rooms in all colors of the political spectrum doing some research about heat. And of course, people have very different and strong opinions about global scale climate change, but even the reddest hats in the room that we encounter with talk about, people who've lived in Phoenix a long time, talk about how much cooler the city used to be than it is today. They'll talk about playing in bare feet when they were children here. And because of the way we've designed and built the city over 1 or 2 generations, they feel like that the environment has changed so much. And the urban climate story does not seem to be as politically charged as the global climate story. So we tried to lean into that where we can.
Thank you. Anyone else? Ms. Gilbert? Ms.
Well,
Segura?
I definitely agree that the urban environmental, heat story is an easier place to start. When I first was appointed chief heat officer, there were elected leaders, people who said, what do we need that for? We've always been hot in Miami. We know heat. That doesn't really come up anymore. The public dialogue and understanding of the risks have grown so much in just 2 years that, and particularly after this last summer, there was an increased investment in some of our work this last budget round because of the understanding that this is something we have to face. We do live in an environment, the federal government is very, as David mentioned, very supportive and working on this issue with us. Our state has worked on coastal resilience, but not so much on heat. And so that isn't somewhere that we get a lot of support at the state level for this work, but we're hopeful by building coalitions across other local governments in Florida. I'm presenting to emergency managers across the state next week. I'm hoping that we will have a greater understanding at the state level. We've tried to pass worker protection law standard at the state level for a couple of years now, and that has not gone through. We're now working on it at a local level, which could be challenging in its own way. But so it's an interesting area to work in. I do work in with an office that works on carbon mitigation as well as sea level rise. So we're very much identified with sustainability and climate. But because Miami is so vulnerable in all those areas, you can't really deny when water is climbing up on your ankles on a sunny day. You can't really deny things. So pretty much people accept that this is our reality and we need to address it.
Thank you so much for that. Marta?
Yeah, I agree that extreme heat is less politically charged than if you have conversations about climate nationwide. But, so I appreciated that people are curious about what we're going to do about extreme heat, and people have lived experiences in their families, especially like Latinos who there's so many outdoor workers that are Latinos in the city and farm workers, in the more rural areas of California and also Miami, and I'm sure Phoenix as well. So yes, people have lots of experiences, negative experiences with extreme heat. But on the flip side of that, I just saw a video the other day about how the right has misinformed the public on climate and basically said it's a myth from the very beginning. And this video made me realize that I don't entirely blame them for being misinformed. Sometimes our politicians, especially at the federal level, take a problem like climate and put a solution to it that's very inadequate, that creates unintended consequences, that has, instead of positive consequences for the people, it has negative consequences for our communities, like cap and trade, right? So the video that I saw was from 2012, how the Democrats try to push cap and trade on the Republicans as the saving grace to save us all from climate change. And as you know, environmental justice organizations were also against cap and trade. So the Republican people from the red states were not alone in opposing cap and trade as this glorious solution for climate change. So when politicians take a problem and try to provide a singular solution that's created by ivory tower, like economists or scientists, and say this technology is going to change everything, it's going to make everything better, people mistrust it. So what we have to do is flip around how we democratize solutions for government by having those solutions emanate from the people. So public awareness is critical to that. And that's why public awareness and organizing and engagement and having conversations with everyday people about extreme heat is an opportunity to catalyze that change and connect it with climate solutions indirectly so that people can get informed properly, know the facts, connect the dots, and come up with solutions that are good for everyone, historically disinvested communities as well as wealthy communities. But I just want to say one more thing, that I do believe we have to invest first and foremost in the historically disinvested communities to get the greatest greenhouse gas emission reductions, to get the death rate down, to get the emergency hospitalization rate down. If you focus your investments first and foremost, like Justice 40 is directing everybody to do, then I think we will accelerate climate solutions. And I agree with my colleagues, both of them, and both of them are an inspiration to me. And honestly, when I first got designated chief heat officer, I didn't think I was going to find my tribe in that group of people, but I have, and I'm really fortunate to be able to learn from them as well. So I agree that it's politically charged, but I also agree that we have a huge opportunity right now to learn from our mistakes from the past and use heat as that catalyst for solutions for the future.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Marta. There's a question by Brady Ferguson in the chat. I don't know if he meant to ask it or he wanted me to ask it. I'm going to ask it, since he said he had to switch over to phone. What is being done, and this is for the three of you, what is being done to prevent brownouts, blackouts when energy use spikes during heat waves? For example, with energy conservation, energy storage, energy generation. That's the question. Who wants to answer?
Yeah, so, our utility is an investor-owned utility, Florida Power and Light. So we don't directly have control over they manage the grid. However, will say they have done a very good job on preventing brownouts and blackouts. We really didn't have any, and we had a truly historically high heat summer. So they have done a good job. It is regulated at the state level through the Public Service Commission to make sure, including, what their transition is to clean energy, but to also manage the resilience of the grid. We are investing in microgrids in the county so that we have more resilience locally around critical facilities. So that's where we can take some control, but it's limited what we can do at a county level.
Largely the same experience in Arizona, out of our jurisdiction directly, but very strong summer, no disruptions outside of normal operating procedure. And I'll note that our utilities are at the table quite regularly. We have a statewide heat resilience work group that meets, and the utilities are there all the time giving us updates and contributing to programs and services that help protect people when they can. beyond their direct program. So we're certainly benefiting from their partnership here.
Yeah. And at LADWP, we do have a Cool LA program, and we just finished the LA 100 Equity Strategies engagement process so that people could provide input on what kinds of renewable energy strategies would be the most equitable for the city of Los Angeles. But it's not an easy task at all, because we're shooting not just for, you know, zero emissions, but equity and also reliability of the grid. And those are all difficult, big problems to tackle for any city. Our DWP is the largest municipal utility in the nation. But even so, even public utilities across the nation have received bonds. So they're also driven to some extent by private investments. So we have to tackle that as well, right? So anyway, I want to say that I think we're definitely going in the right direction. LA 100 is a wonderful step forward, and it's just always a big challenge to implement the best, latest technologies and make it an equitable distribution.
Thank you so much. Sunita, you had a question, I think, and did you want to ask your question? Sunita Surachi? Sunita?
Yes, I was wondering about a very simple solution. Simply passing out solar-powered fans to homeless people, which it seems like a relatively cheap solution. I've seen them on Amazon. They're pretty freely available. Is that a possible solution to mitigating some of the heat-related deaths?
What I've heard from our unhoused community organizations and leaders is that we need more mobile triage as a whole, and we need more mobile resilience hubs as well to be where the unhoused are. And then we need what they're calling climate stations. They're basically pop-up resilience hubs for the unhoused, which provide much more than fans. They do provide some fans. I don't know if they're electric fans, but they provide fans, they provide water, they provide electrolytes, they provide shade, they provide refuge and chairs under the tent. So I think we need a comprehensive approach for the unhoused, and we need to listen to the organizations that currently serve them, because they see all of the, you know, logistical challenges and geographic challenges of providing the most support for the greatest number of the unhoused. But I'll let them know that you recommend that.
Ms. Hondula, Ms. Gilbert, what is the situation in your cities with the unhoused?
Well, one, we don't have as high an unhoused population as LA or Phoenix. We do have it, and it is quite vulnerable. What we did do this summer, similarly, is donations of water and cooling gaiters and towels that we taught them how to use. And those are very effective for cooling. And then at certain thresholds, in addition to just encouraging them to go to a cool spot and showing them where they could go, we actually provided transportation, or the outreach provided transportation to those sites. But I'll bring up the fans as well. I don't know. I know probably in Phoenix, when it gets so hot, those fans may not be helpful, because it's just blowing hot air into your face, and that might make it worse.
Yeah.
So you need the water to evaporate it off or something.
Yeah. And Pilar, I don't know if I can, but I'd like to address a comprehensive, multifaceted approach to heat mitigation and heat adaptation. We're asking about which solutions would work. No solution alone would work by itself. We need more tree canopy. We need more shade structures. We need more hydration stations. We need some cool pavement. We need more cooling centers and resilience centers. We need to decarbonize homes and make them healthier for everyone. We need to decarbonize our transportation system. Basically, and we need to disconnect future homes from gas, right? And even existing homes and buildings. We need to figure out whether it's feasible, and suitable and healthy to decarbonize existing homes, or are we just going to create more homelessness and displacement? So we need to be very mindful of the impacts on the most vulnerable communities as we move forward, because it's great to have an electric vehicle, and I have two of them. My husband and mine, we have an electric vehicle charging station, but those are far and few between in low-income communities. Even if the city were to provide charging stations on every block, I think that there would still be far and few between. So we need systems change. We need comprehensive approaches. And as far as cool seal or cool pavement, I think we're finding at the city of LA, it's very costly. It's very expensive. It deteriorates quickly in heavily trafficked areas. So we want to place it where it will do the most good. And that's when you have these multifaceted approaches. We have trees, you have shade structures, you have some cool seal, but really you want more vegetation. Really you want more bioswales and transpiration from your trees, and the ability for the soil to be permeable to refeed that aquifer system that creates the circular, transpiration that cools down a microenvironment. So there's so much to consider beyond, some of our newer technologies. I think that's why I keep going back to what did communities do in the past and to keep their homes cool. They had porches so they could sit out at night, even sleep outside of their homes at night when it got really hot.
Yes.
They had adobe structures. There's so much great information on passive cooling and how passive cooling and the materials that you use to build the home. And if you have trees outside, it completely reduces the energy burden of that home. Heat pumps are a new technology that I think is valuable. Cool roofs. So anyway, we could talk about for days what these comprehensive approaches are, but no one single approach will work.
Yeah, point taken. Mr. Hondula?
Yeah, just to add on homelessness, it's so complicated, the intersection. I'll just share one example where regional coordination has really benefited us on that front. We learned here over a number of years how different the experience was for people at different cooling centers. In some cases, it's a lobby of a government building where maybe there's a case of lukewarm water sitting there to take on your own. And in other cases, it's a very comprehensive social service model at a church, let's say. And the public information that we were sharing out treated all cooling centers equally, and people were having very different experiences, sometimes unexpected experiences. For example, showing up at a public building, maybe taking a short rest or nap, as one might if we've been outside in the heat for 24, 48 consecutive hours and finally in a safe, cool space. So with the regional cooling center work group here, we actually came up with some different names for the facilities this year and started using that vocabulary. So if somebody did need a place to spend more time, take a nap, have more services around, we now call that something different than a cooling center, which is more of a pop in, pop out, cool off for a little while model. And the fact that, for example, the security staff at the library could say, I now understand what you're looking for, and if we can get you transported across the street to the respite center, you'll be able to stay there all day and take a nap. I think that's made a huge difference this summer, just as one small win in trying to address the major challenge of heat and homelessness.
Thank you so much. There's a very important question here by Clavel Rangel. Do you want to ask it, Clavel?
Yes, I have a question for Jane. Do you know if a program exists that monitors workplace, such a warehouse, for example? We know that undocumented people or those who awaiting migratory status often work in warehouse, where the extreme heat in Miami can be particularly harsh. What measure are you taking to prevent heat-related fatalities and ensure it doesn't feel like a migration verification process?
Yeah, this is very challenging.
Yeah, I know.
Because what we did this summer was really do a lot of outreach about the importance of heat safety to employers, directly to employees, what they can do, how to contact OSHA. But when you're talking about undocumented in warehouses, they're going to be reluctant to contact OSHA if they're not treated well. And we do have a pending ordinance that's going to go before the commission for a second hearing around heat safety, but does not include, it only includes construction and agriculture, so it would not cover people in high heat environments and warehouses. The best we can do on this front is communication about the benefits, not only to the workers, but to the employers themselves in terms of worker productivity and not lost work time, and shame the employers where we see there are problems. But the county currently does not have a way to enforce something like that unless it's another violation, a building code violation or something else that happens, which, you know, we do try to code compliance, use those levers if we can. An important question.
Thank you. The other two panelists answered in the chat, and in the interest of time, we have 2 minutes left. We're probably going to take a couple of more minutes past the hour. I'm going to ask the last question of the three of you. Marta, you said that heat can be a catalyst for change, coming from communities, great vision. And this is the last question for all of you. Do you agree heat is moving the needle on climate change? Marta?
I do. I think extreme heat is moving the needle of communications amongst communities and in the media. I was shocked when I first became a chief heat officer how much media attention was given to extreme heat, and the number of interviews and conversations I was having with the media moving forward. And it's been nonstop. I think the mayor's office tells me I keep them too busy with all these media requests. So it's the media loves to talk about extreme heat, you know, and extreme weather, period. So it's made it a lot more relevant. And we now have extreme heat as part of our local hazard mitigation plan, our climate adaptation plan. We're developing our own heat action plan because it's a tangible, real issue that hurts a lot of people and families. So yes.
Thank you so much, Marta, as always. Jane, Gilbert?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a whole lot to add to Marta's comments. I think it absolutely has advanced our political capital, social capital to move things forward on an overall climate agenda. And you know, there has been a huge amount of public attention on extreme heats in the last 2 years. Certainly this last summer just took it to another level to make, you know, all political persuasions realize that we need to do something, and that it's because it's what people are feeling. It's their health.
Hard to argue with what you're feeling and seeing. Mr. Hondula, David Hondula from Phoenix.
Yeah, I agree with my colleagues, and on this sense of political capital that Jane talked to. I don't think it's always the case that every city or county department has very strong support from underserved communities. But I think at least our experience in Phoenix is on this topic. Our team sure does, almost to a point of intimidating charge and responsibility. As one of our local advocates said, your group, David, has the community at its back. Don't blow it. So I think that the pressure is there, and the time window is short, and there is that sense of urgency that I suspect Marta and Jane and I all feel. But I'd rather feel that pressure than the opposite of having a resistance from the community to what we're trying to do.
Absolutely. Well, it's been an honor and a privilege to have three of you. And I think I breathe a little bit easier knowing that we have such public servants dealing with this issue. We really appreciate you taking the time to come to speak with Ethnic Media. We know that this community reaches deep into, people who speak other languages, immigrant communities, and others who are not maybe as exposed to issues from, the mainstream media, et cetera. So I appreciate it. And thank you for all my colleagues. I don't know if Sandy wants to say goodbye or anything. Sandy,
I'm
the boss.
I'm struggling with, no, it was a great vision. I hope you can hear me because
Yes, we can hear you.
the idea of heat as a catalyst for change is just such a powerful and optimistic vision, and you can't do much without optimism. So you gave us all three of you gave us a real vision of optimism. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.